Okay, class, welcome back to English 2333. Let us talk about what's happening and where we are and what's going on now. Very good. Class, one of the things is we had an incredible session on Thursday where we met for 2 hours. Students conference with me. I went over your one-page pitches for your oral presentations, and I got everyone signed up for their date and their time for their oral presentation. Now, everybody knows the date and time that they have, and I will, in the next few days, formalize this. But as I said, Thursday we had a wonderful 2 hour session with you students where we approved all those oral presentations that, as you know, will start after we come back from spring break. So today there's a couple of things that I want to go over. I want to talk again about the schedule, about what's coming up. Classes, we mentioned last time in my lecture, and certainly I went over this Thursday with you, class, according to, once again, our course policies and calendar, that you're going to have a midterm that I'll give you on the 8th, and you're going to turn it in on the 10th of March. It won't be anything that we haven't covered. It's basically going to be on Swift, Jonathan Swift, and Voltaire and Candide. Now I'm going to lecture today about Candide and Voltaire. So, and I'll give you a study guide before then, talking about everything that you'll need to. And once again, as I mentioned on Thursday, class, it will be an essay question, essay or essays that you will certainly write for me, okay? One or two essays, short essays that would be that a person could write in class if we were in class in about a 50-minute session, okay? So we'll be preparing for that. And my job today is I want to lecture a bit on Voltaire. I want to talk about where we left off last time in regards to Jonathan Swift. I'd given you some questions, and I want to talk about those questions now before I get into and we start talking about the importance of Voltaire. Certainly was important when I was even at the community college, and is so today. And then I'll give you these questions in regards to Voltaire, because these questions that I gave you in regards to Swift, are possibilities for our midterm. So, one of the questions I asked you, is Gulliver a hero? An answer: one may choose to compare Gulliver's actions and characteristics with other great characters such as Odysseus, who is also has great sea adventures, or Jason and the Argonauts. Odysseus is crafty and strong, but Gulliver does not endure great hardships or overcome great enemies. This is a satire, not an epic. A satire, once again, not an epic. So we neither expect nor need a hero. Instead, Gulliver. And what happens in Gulliver's Travel is Swift gives us a narrator who tells us his own story as an everyman. Fascinating, because that's also going to move into, once again, a Candide. As an everyman, the point is that he is not greatly different from an average human being, though he becomes much wiser and more thoughtful. Excellent. So that's answers to be thinking about in regards to Gulliver's Travels and Jonathan Swift. Question number 2 I gave you is is Gulliver a reliable narrator? So can we believe him? We're going to also have this, be thinking about this in regards to Candide and Voltaire. Answer: we generally trust his statements, even though they are about fantastic beings and places. We do not need to believe that such things actually happen. Instead, we should recall that Swift has important lessons to teach, though the satire and the imagery narrator of these fictional travels. Beyond that, we might trust Gulliver because of his thoughtfulness, class, and his prudence in some ways, and because he is willing to relate good news and bad news, good and bad things about various kinds of people in the same even tone. All right, fascinating. We look at narrators that are narrating, telling this story. We ask ourselves, is this person reliable? Is it believable? Or is the narrator trying to pull a fast one on us? Go either way in fiction class. Discuss Jonathan Swift's connection to Gulliver. Jonathan Swift's connection to Gulliver. Class, the author need not share the narrator's opinions, but we always should keep in mind that it is Swift who has presented a narrator to the reader, with certain opinions. Sometimes Swift's joke is at Gulliver's expense. Also consider Gulliver's attack on humanity in the end, especially in part 4. Excellent. And class, what makes the question I give you, number 4, the Hahnemann society ideal or a model for humans, right? Answer: from Gulliver's perspective, the Hahnemanns have established the ideal society. In fact, when he returns home to England, he cannot stand the sight or smell of humans and prefers to spend his time in the barn with his horses. The Hahnemanns are more rational than the Yahoos and the other peoples in the novel. Note other ways that the Yahoos are unlike the Hahnemanns. So excellent, class. And then finally, class, bodily functions are described often in great detail in the novel. Why is Jonathan Swift so graphic in his portrayal? Humanity's base functions comprise an important aspect of the novel. Swift pays great attention to the real world, the material world, while people actually have to live their lives. In addition to the slapstick value of associating different things in the text with excrement, Swift reminds us that we are, once again, embodied mortals. So in the concept that, no matter what happens or who we are, class, we are mortal beings that are going to die. So once again, excellent things to think about, questions to think about, excellent in regards to our discussion of Jonathan Swift, class. And it tells us in our, once again, in our text as we move on. We move on page 349 to Voltaire. Imagine a writer so outspoken and so fearless. This is the introduction to Voltaire. That although his work landed him in prison and in exile, more than once he never stopped writing defiantly. Okay, so this is the writer once again as rebel, the writer as social critic. If he could not publish his work openly, he would have it printed secretly and smuggled across borders, class. Voltaire, the great French writer. Class, the sheer gustiness of Voltaire is breathtaking, both then and today. Okay. In an atmosphere of stern censorship and absolute power, he managed to live to the ripe old age of 83, which was gigantic back then. And we think once again right now of what's going on in the world, censorship and power. He managed to live to the ripe old age of 83, writing lively denunciations of dominant orthodoxies and powerful authorities almost every day. So, Voltaire would say, you know what? This is my critique of the power structure. This is my rebellion. This is my critique of the social order. Sometimes this is my critique of, once again, of also the Catholic Church of the time. Voltaire. Class. His witty, light prose and his clear and accessible style, and we see that, class, as you once again dive into Voltaire and Candide. The style is clear and it is accessible. Got a little background noise, but not too much, class. My son's getting some water here. His witty, light prose and his clear and accessible style allowed him to popularize many of the revolutionary goals of the Enlightenment. Human rights, class. We see that playing out now. We see that still playing out today. The value of freedom and tolerance. 1694 to 1778 when he lived. The hope for progress through reasoned debate and the urgent desire to end human suffering where we can. So class, check that out in regards to everything that continues on in societies, continuing what's happening right now in the world. It is no small smart thanks to Voltaire that these ideals shape our own political, once again, landscape today. And what a trip as we move into this, class, as we see what's happening in Europe and Russia right now. That's why, once again, Voltaire is in our textbook and has made this, once again, jump in some ways into almost immortality with this novel Candide that I certainly first read as a young man. Not that young man of a man, but maybe, I think I read it on my own when I was 22 and blown away by it, class. Bold, witty, and rebellious, Voltaire was a trouble to his parents as a child and became a trouble to the authorities for the rest of his life. He was born near Paris in 1694 to a middle-class family. At the age of 10, he went to a boarding school run by Jesuits where he developed an enthusiasm, class, for literature and a passionate opposition class he had to organized religion. Voltaire. So sparkling and brilliant was his conversation that he won powerful friends, for his propensity for satire also brought him enemies. An attack on the acting head of state got him locked in the Bastille prison in Paris for almost a year. While there, he committed himself to writing, and his first play, Oedipus, turned into a huge success, bringing him considerable wealth in establishing his reputation. The young writer, who was now known by his pen name as Voltaire, spent 3 years in exile in England. After a quarrel with a French nobleman, there he met the writers Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope. So our last field of study flows over once again into Voltaire. In 1750, Voltaire moved to Potsdam in Prussia, where he joined the court of the young King Frederick, later be known as Frederick the Great, who loved the arts and wanted philosophy and literature to flourish. Voltaire, like many other Enlightenment thinkers, did not see democracy as the best form of government. Wow, fascinating, right? Playing out today, playing out this weekend. The debate. The masses seemed to him to impede reason, freedom, and progress. He said he would rather obey one lion than 200 rats. Fascinating, fascinating. The debate continues. The regime he idolized was the enlightened despot, a sensitive, rational king who welcomed dissent and sought the counsel of philosophers like himself. Early on, Frederick promised to live up to that ideal, but Voltaire was soon to be disappointed. He and Frederick argued. Frederick waged violent warfare, inserted power high-handedly, and Voltaire was invited to leave. Okay, the king once again and the enlightened philosopher. All right. It was here that he wrote, when he took up residence for the rest of his life in Ferney, a town on the border between France and Switzerland, so that he could escape from France easily if necessary when the politics, the wars, and things got too brutal. He could escape. It was here in this small town that he began to write his best-selling Candide, of which I'm going to give you some questions and talk about today, and a great deal more. Okay. Class. And he refused the traditional literary goal of immortality, casting his writing as a response to dealing with, rather than mortality or immortality, he wanted to deal with, once again, current debates and events that were going on, once again, in the country, in the world, in politics. And in doing so, in some ways, he kind of gained immortality. Class. Very good. Voltaire wrote Candide in part as a response to a piece of news that shook him. Class. That shook him. And many of his contemporaries badly. Okay. History shook him. On November 1st, 1755, a devastating earthquake hit Lisbon in Portugal. Upwards of 30,000 people died. Voltaire, writing almost obsessively about the tragedy in his letters, wondered how anyone could make a case for an optimistic philosophy in light of it. Okay. He worried over Alexander Pope's assertion in his essays on man that whatever is right. Could anyone really believe that this was God's will? That a just and rational God had created this world, and that it was, in the words of German philosopher Leibniz, the best of all possible worlds. And so that's what, there's the debate, there's the story of, once again, Candide. Is it the best of all possible worlds in the midst of what? Unmitigated tragedy. And we see this play out through its pages, and you'll see it as you read it. Voltaire, absurd philosopher Pangloss, is a character of Leibniz. Though philosophical, Candide is so brief and so easy to read, and you'll see that, class, as you continue to read it, that it was immediately popular with a wide range of readers. Voltaire deliberately opted for short, cheap, excitingly readable texts. Long works will never make a revolution, he argued, and wrote that if the New Testament had cost 4,200 sentences, the Christian religion would never have taken root. Thus, Candide's brevity may be seen part of its power, as part of its power, absolutely. It was short, it was brief, it's easy to read, is powerful, a powerful critique, is funny, it's absurd in a lot of ways, class. It is also, it tells us, class, in this introduction, deliberately entertaining. Voltaire combines lively appetite for humor with a horrifying sense of the real existence of evil. The exuberance and extravagance of the sufferings that the characters undergo may even at times, class, and it does, as we read it, it prompts us to laugh because it's so absurd and so wild. The plight of the old woman whose buttocks has been cut off to make rump steak for her starving companions, the weeping of two girls whose monkey lovers have been killed, the glum circumstances of 6 exiled, poverty-stricken kings. But Voltaire also manages to keep his readers off-balanced, raped, cut to pieces, hanged, stabbed in the belly. The central characters of Candide keep coming back to life at opportune moments, as though no disaster could have permanent effects. Fascinating, okay? Unmitigated tragedy. The extravagances of the story are therefore uncomfortably matched by the extravagances of real life. Okay? So the story in some ways, in many ways, mirroring real life and real history. And despite the cosmic lightness of the telling, Voltaire demands that the reader confronts, once again, these horrors of actual life, of sometimes life in reality, but certainly life also exaggerated. Candide is a naive traveler like Jonathan Swift's Gulliver, who does not grasp the ironies that he witnesses. He travels widely, taken in Europe, South America, and the Ottoman Empire, where Catholics, Protestants, and Muslims all emerge as cruel and hypocritical. Fascinating, class. So a lot of that is still playing out today. Still playing out today. And not as intensely, but certainly as we see it throughout the world, and the hypocrisy sometimes of the tragedy, in its sense, of sometimes organized religions. And then, of course, class, on another level, when it can be surpassed, the true beauty of the spiritual path. But yeah, a lot of not needing to happen tragedies, class. It is like the Garden of Eden, a paradise no longer home to fallen humanity. The fact that Candide admires Milton's Paradise Lost, and that the novella concludes with the protagonist cultivating a garden, suggests that Voltaire may have been rethinking the story of Adam and Eve in his own imaginative way. Because I don't want to give it away, but once again, in the end of Candide, there's a going back to what? Some grasp for simplicity. Some grasp for the basics of a simple life, of a life of finding solace and peace. Candide encapsulated the many problems that stoked Voltaire's anger and fed his satire. Absolutionism and religious bigotry, unnecessary bloodshed, right? Think of that now, right? Religious bigotry, think of that now, even though this is the 1700s. Unnecessary bloodshed, restrictions on freedom of speech and religion, and the intolerable reality of human suffering. The intolerable reality of human suffering, class, portrayed in Candide by Voltaire and mirroring in some ways, many ways, real life. This story has always been the most famous work of its author's incalculably influential career. Voltaire inspired leaders of the American Revolution, class, such as Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, and Benjamin Franklin, and helped to shape the United States' Constitution. The French Revolution arises, held Voltaire up. The French revolutionaries of the French Revolution held Voltaire up as a hero, as did generations fighting against religious intolerance throughout the world, class. He was hotly reviled by those who wanted to maintain the authority of established churches, and some went so far as to call him, in the time, the Antichrist. The Antichrist. But in the centuries that have followed, Voltaire's ideas have become part of the common fabric of our ideals. Excellent, class. Excellent. So, that's a little bit of an overview of what we're dealing with here. Okay. And then, on page 372, once again, we hit then right into the text, Candide or optimism, translated from the German of Dr. Ralph, with the additions which were found in the doctor's pocket when he died at the Minden year of our Lord 1759. Chapter 1, how Candide was brought up in a fine castle and how he was then driven from that castle. Class, it's a great piece of literature. My book is heavily annotated. Get in there, nail Candide by Voltaire. Nail Candide by Voltaire. Because this will be included in our, once again, midterm. Possibly. So, and it goes from 372, class, all the way, once again, to 431. 372 to 431. So very digestible, very doable. Get in there, engage it, take it apart, class. And a couple of questions I want you to think about. I want you to think about as you're reading it, class. Number one, write these questions down right now, please. How is philosophical optimism? How is philosophical optimism depicted in Candide? Okay, it's a heavy question. Annotate when you read. Underline when you read. Think about these questions. Look up these words. Look up these terms. Philosophical optimism. How is philosophical optimism depicted in Candide? Question 1. Think about that. Look for examples of it within the text. This will be all important in regards to your midterm. We're going to have another lecture before then when I'm going to talk about these for you, class. What is the significance, number 2, of the disease Pangloss, Contracts, and Candide? Look for that. What is the significance of the disease Pangloss, Contracts, and Candide? Pangloss goes through everything, class. Almost every imaginable hell. I don't want to give it away. But what is the significance? Be thinking about this. Of the disease Pangloss, Contracts, and Candide. Question number 2. That was question number 2. What is the significance of the disease Pangloss, Contracts, and Candide? All right. Be thinking about that, class. Just a couple more questions. Why does Voltaire, question number 3, for you to write down and to contemplate. Why does Voltaire choose hanging as a means of death for Pangloss and Candide? Wrestle around with that, class. Why does Voltaire choose hanging as a means of death for Pangloss and Candide? Okay. Question number 3. Why does Voltaire choose hanging as a means of death for Pangloss and Candide? Question number 3. Question number 4. 2 more questions, class. 2 more questions. What is the importance of religion in Candide? What is the importance of religion in Candide? Question number 4. What is the importance of religion in Candide? Be thinking about that as you're engaging the text, as you go through it. What's the importance of religion in Candide? When I lecture again on this, I'll help you with this before the midterm. And number 5, finally, the final question, how does philosophical optimism color Candide's reactions to the deaths of Don Issachar and the Grand Inquisitor? Okay. Once again, that phrase, philosophical optimism. Philosophical optimism. Everything is meant to be as it's supposed to be. This is unequivocally God's will. Optimistically God's will. How does philosophical optimism color Candide's reactions to the deaths of Don Issachar and the Grand Inquisitor? Okay? So class, I'm hoping you wrote those questions down as you continue to dig into our text. Play these questions over and read the text closely. Once again, highlight, annotate it, be thinking about it in regards to your midterm. And we will take it from there. Class, we talked about, once again, everything that we're going to be doing. We talked about the course policies and calendar of where we are. We talked about certainly the days ahead of what's coming up. We talked about, class, once again, the oral presentations and the final list for that, and what a great class that we had on Thursday live for 2 hours. It was fantastic. And with that said, class, I'm wishing you well. Good luck, good luck, good luck as you continue your studies, and we will certainly see you back next time, okay? So look for this video and my upcoming memo and all that we need to do. And good luck with your studies class. I hope you and your families stay well, and that you're enjoying the beginning of spring. All right, class. That's enough for now. Good luck, good luck, good luck, as the Irish say. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.